Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chen, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we will continue the reading of Volume 1 of Thousand Autumns, or Tian Qiu by Meng Xi Shi, and we will be reading Chapter 7, 8, and 9. Enjoy! Chapter 7, The Weakling Who Wasn't Weak. For a moment, Chun Gong froze. Then he said, "Did you bring these?" Shun Qiao nodded. "Didn't you ask me to return with 3 donkey meat sandwiches?" Chen Gong noticed then that Shun Qiao had changed into a new green robe. The gray robe he'd worn before was beneath him, being used as bedding. And the person himself was still as clean and tidy as ever. Perhaps he'd managed to find somewhere to take a bath. "Where did you get the money for them?" Chen Gong was suspicious. Shun Qiao smiled. "I did it the ethical way, of course. Look at me. Do I look like I could steal anything?" Chun Gong harrumphed. "Who knows?" That said, he still picked up a sandwich. It was warm and soft to the touch, clearly fresh off the stove. He opened the paper packet and took a bite. The sandwich was baked golden brown, and when he bit into the crust, juices gushed out and a smoky, rich aroma filled the air. Chun Gong's gluttony flared up, and he ate 2 in one go. He couldn't bear to eat the final one, though, and after thinking about it, decided to leave it for tomorrow's breakfast. He could have it right before going to work. He turned his head to look at Shun Qiao, who was still sitting there cross-legged with his bamboo cane in his arms. His eyes were gently closed, and Chun Gong couldn't tell if he was resting or thinking. "Hey," he said, "where are you from?" Shun Qiao shook his head. "I don't know. I fell while on the road and knocked my head, so I forgot many things." "If you don't want to say, then just don't. What kind of excuse is that? You think I'm a real sucker, do you?" Displeased, Chun Gong lost all interest in chatting and lay right down. But then, perhaps because he'd overstuffed himself, no matter how he tossed and turned, he couldn't fall asleep. So Chun Gong had nothing else to do but try talking again. "Hey, what exactly were you doing all day? How do you earn that money?" A soft voice came from the other side of the temple. "Reading palms and telling fortunes." "You know how to read fortunes?" Chun Gong sat up and faced him. Shun Qiao was still sitting in place, cross-legged. "Honestly, it doesn't involve much reading," he said with a smile. "But a person's palm will always give away small traces of whether they are poor or rich. It's just a trifling skill to earn a little money." Chun Gong perked up. "Then can you see if riches and glory are in my fate as well?" "Let me feel your hand." Chun Gong extended his hands to him, and Shun Qiao stroked them for a moment. "You're used to carrying heavy loads on a daily basis, so you must be working seasonally at a granary or at the docks, correct?" "What else?" Chun Gong was not stupid. He knew Shun Qiao must have drawn his conclusion from the thick calluses that covered his hands. "You're stubborn, tough, and defiant in disposition, as well as a bit distrustful. You must have fallen out with your family when you were small, and you probably have a stepmother or a stepfather." Chun Gong couldn't help but stare wide-eyed. "What else?" Shun Qiao smiled. "With the world in turmoil these days, there is one thing you can do. With your character, if you join the army, there's a chance you'll be able to really make something of yourself." "How do you manage to see all this?" "Your accent is local, so you couldn't possibly be a refugee from afar. But local citizens usually have a house, unless something went wrong with their family. Given your personality, chances are it's like I said, that you fell out with yours. But even if you had fallen out, if your father and mother were around, they wouldn't just have sat back when you ended up outside in the rain and wind. So either your father must have married a severe stepmother, or both your parents passed early." He laid out his reasoning step by step, and Chun Gong was finally mostly convinced. Well, then how do you know I'll be successful if I join the army? You don't want to live beneath your stepmother's temper, so you left home in such a fury you would rather stay out here. And last night you fought those beggars over donkey meat sandwiches. Therefore, I can tell that you're a person who's ruthless to both yourself and to others. If that's the case, you'd be well suited to a military environment. Chung snorted coldly. So basically, you just look down on people like me who can't manage a full meal and needs to steal your stuff. All this beating around the bush, but it turns out you're just making fun of me. Shun Qiao smiled. Who am I to look down on you when I'm in such a sorry state myself? Didn't you just ask me to demonstrate how I read palms and tell fortunes? I only used you as an example, to explain. And I was quite correct, wasn't I? I can't make a lot of money this way, but it's still enough for a meal. If you're such a smooth talker, acting like you know everything, how come you're still so down and out? Did you get robbed by bandits on the road? Possibly. I don't remember myself. Sometimes my mind is clear, sometimes it isn't. Many things are fuzzy and vague. Luckily, you were willing to let me stay here. Otherwise, I really don't know where I would have spent the last 2 nights. I should owe you my thanks. Having been duly praised, Chunggong became much more at ease. He even felt like it was right and proper for Shun Qiao to give him those 3 donkey meat sandwiches, as if Chunggong really had personally protected him. So, it's still 3 sandwiches tomorrow. Don't think that you can worm your way out of it by talking my ear off. All right. The next evening, when Chunggong returned to the ramshackle temple, there were 3 donkey meat sandwiches placed upon his spot once again, just like the night before. On the other side of the room, Shun Qiao held another in his hand and was eating away, slow and methodical, as if it weren't a donkey meat sandwich, but some kind of exotic, high-class delicacy. What a poser! Chunggong snorted again, then turned his head and opened the paper bag before taking a vicious bite. And when Chunggong returned the evening after that, 3 more donkey meat sandwiches were there again, just like before. He didn't bother with courtesies, just picked one up and ate it straight away. Even though Shen Qiao was mild-tempered and quick to respond to his questions, Chunggong always felt that they were too different from each other. The words never made things better. He had difficulty understanding the things Shun Qiao said, and Shun Qiao seemed immune to Chunggong's attempts to be fierce and intimidating. It was like landing a punch in cotton. Even though he clearly held the upper hand, he was the one who ended up stifled. His intuition told him that Shun Qiao was someone remarkable, not just because of the unfailing pristine clothes, which lent him a scholar's refined frailty, but also because there was the sense of something indescribable and unfathomable about him. Even though they were both sheltering in the same ramshackle temple, Chun Gong still felt like he was one level beneath the guy. Chun Gong didn't like that feeling, so he didn't like Shun Qiao either. Wind leaked in through all the temple walls, so the nights were freezing. There were probably far more rats than humans in residence. His shoes were torn, and it felt like something was nibbling at his toes. Chunggong yelped in pain, but was loath to get up and seek revenge on a rat, so he simply curled up tighter instead. Amid the howling wind, it seemed the sound of footsteps drew near from outside. But who'd come to this shithole in the midst of a hellish wind? Chunggong was about to doze off when he heard Shun Qiao say, "Someone's coming in." He opened his eyes and saw several skulking silhouettes slip inside, bludgeons held in their hands. The 2 in front seemed terribly familiar. With a proper look, he recognized them as the 2 beggars he'd driven away the other night. Chunggong jolted up awake in an instant. He quickly got to his feet. "The hell are you doing?" One of them laughed and said, "Chung Da Lang, Chung Da Lang. Weren't you full of vibrato just the other day? You even drove us out of here. But we've called on our brothers from the town's beggar guild today. Let's see you cop an attitude now." Chun Gong spat at them. What beggar guild? You're just a bunch of beggars fooling around. How is that a guild? Still talking smack when your end is near? The other man replied angrily. Don't go pleading for mercy later. Brothers, this is the bastard who stole our territory. Oh, there's also a new guy. He's got money on him. We'll take them both down. With all the stuff we get off them, we'll buy a round of drinks. Anyone can tell at a glance that Chung Gong was destitute. Even if he did have money on him, at most it would buy a few buns. But this other man was different. His clothes were clean and tidy. Even if all they did was yank those robes off, surely they could sell them for a couple dozen copper coins. 5 or 6 figures lunged at Chung Gong all at once. Despite his power and ruthlessness, in the end, he was only a teenage boy, and he was nowhere near solid or sturdy. The other side's strength and overwhelming numbers had him down and beat in just a few moments with a mass of vicious blows to his face and body. They weren't after his life, but they weren't holding back either. The corner of Chung Gong's mouth was split open. All he could do was try to shield his vital areas from getting kicked. The beggars searched Chung Gong over, but their final haul was only 30 copper coins. One of them spat and said, What bad luck! We got ourselves a bum. Lida, didn't you say he had at least 50 coppers? Lida smiled apologetically. Maybe he spent it all. Anyway, there's still another one over there. The crowd turned their attention to Shun Qiao and saw that he'd been sitting quietly the entire time, as if he'd been scared stupid. He held a bamboo cane tucked in his arms and remained unmoving. One man wondered, why does it look like there's something wrong with his eyes? He blind? Confident in their greater numbers, Lai Dai yelled, Hey, hand over all your money you got, and us grandpas will spare you a beating. You hear me? Shun Xiao shook his head. I worked hard to earn the money I have, so I can't give it to you. Lai Dai sneered. Oh, quite the spine you've got. That's fine then. Hold on to it. 2 days ago, you wouldn't even give up a single donkey meat sandwich. Today, us grandpas want you bloody and penniless. Several people lunged at him, intent on doing to Shun Qiao exactly what they'd done to Chung Gong. They underestimated this frail and feeble scholar from the start. Lai Da moved the fastest. One fist was already hurtling towards Shun Qiao's face, his other hand moving to grab his lapel. Judging from their positions, the fist should have hit its target, forcing the other man to topple over backwards, giving Lai Da the perfect chance to pounce atop him. But suddenly, pain speared through his wrist. A yelp escaped Lai Da. Before he understood what was going on, something else struck him in the waist, forcing him to fall to the side and knocking over his nearby companion. The two of them landed in a heap. There was no candlelight within the broken-down temple, and it was a windy night that kept the moon half hidden as clouds scudded past overhead. No one had gotten a clear view of why exactly Lai Da fell, so none of them stopped coming. They lunged at Shun Qiao. But then came the sound of several thwacks, and a couple more people dropped to the ground. What kind of sorcery are you using? Lai Da was undeterred. While he yelled, he heaved himself upright and lunged at his opponent again. Shun Qiao's vision had been slow to recover. At night, when the light was dim, he could only see a blurred mass of shadows. The moment his attention slipped, Lai Da pushed him down and punched him square in the chest, forcing him to suck in a painful gasp of cold air. After his successful strike, Lai Da moved to grab Shun Qiao's cane from his hands, but then a point on his waist went numb, and the cane came crashing toward him. It wasn't particularly fast, yet, as Lai Da reached for the cane, he failed to grasp it and instead was jabbed viciously in the nose. He screamed in pain, unable to think about anything else. He clutched at his nose and fell to the side, blood trickling out between his fingers. This development took everyone by surprise. Chen Gong was completely frozen, watching as Shen Xiao struck here and there with his bamboo cane. Though there seemed no rhyme or reason to his strikes, the beggars couldn't get anywhere near him. Instead, they were promptly sent sprawling all over the place, wailing as they landed on the ground. I'm going easy on you now, said Shun Xiao, and yet you still won't leave. Do you want me to stab out your eyes and turn you blind, like me? His voice was soft, unnerving, mingling with the wind like a ghost. Of course, Lai Da and his friends dared not stay. Straight away, they scrambled to their feet and fled. This time, they didn't even bother with some parting trash talk, just beat an immediate retreat as if they might wet their pants in terror. You should have just stabbed them blind, Chen Gong said hatefully. What's the point of holding back with people like that? Shen Xiao leaned on his bamboo cane and didn't reply. The rise and fall of his shoulders was noticeable, as if he was panting slightly. Only then did Chen Gong come around and realized if Shen Xiao could beat off all those beggars, then taking on Chen Gong himself would be a snap. Plus, he'd yelled and squawked at Shen Xiao before. Luckily for him, Shen Xiao hadn't taken offense. Otherwise, a little frightened, his tone turned polite. Hey, Shen Qiao, Shen Langjun, Shen Qianbei. Just as Chen Gong spoke, the other man suddenly slid down the pillar behind him and fell limply to the ground. Chen Gong could only stare. Chapter 8. Journeying Together. When Shen Xiao came to, he saw old beans slatted above his head, decayed with age, looking almost in danger of crashing down at any moment. Someone at his side was shaking his shoulder. At first, he didn't realize where he was and absently muttered, Shirdi, don't fuss. Who are you calling Shirdi? Changong was in a bad mood. You slept for 2 days and 2 nights. I used all the money I had on me and still wasn't enough, so I took yours for now. But that's only enough for 3 days. If we can't pay tomorrow, we'll be kicked out back to the broken down temple. Oh, said Shen Qiao. He stared blankly at the ceiling beams for a long time, his eyes vacant. Changong had no idea what he was looking at. Seeing Shen Qiao act like none of this was his problem, Changong got angry. He couldn't help but shove his shoulder again. Say something, don't just stare. We're at an inn now. I was afraid that they'd come back looking for revenge, so I moved you out of the temple and even hired you a doctor. The doctor said something about your stagnant chi or whatever, some kind of cold chi inside you. Anyway, it's something bad, and he prescribed you a lot of medicine. So we used up all the money. Shen Qiao came back to himself. Tell him not to prescribe any medicine. Even if I take it, it's useless. I know my body best. This isn't something that can be rushed. What's the use of saying that now? I've already bought the medicine. You telling me to try and return it? Oh, said Shen Qiao. In that case, never mind. Chen Gong half squatted so that their eyes were level. Hey, since you're so skilled, why don't we work as street performers? Or maybe we should just join the Liu He Guild. They've got a branch in the county. With your martial prowess, you could definitely land a good position. And then you can bring me in. What is the Liu He Guild? Asked Shen Qiao. In the face of his blank and guileless expression, Chen Gong was forced to explain, although impatiently. It's a guild that does business by both land and sea. On land, they mainly perform escort missions. I've also heard that they do some spy work for hire or something like that. In any case, anyway, it's just a really big guild. I only found out about it when I heard someone mention it. So how about it? Let's join the Liu He Guild. If we can find a good job, then you won't have to tell fortunes all day, and I won't have to haul rice either. By the end of his speech, he was brimming with excitement. Shen Qiao shook his head. I've told you before that there are many things I don't remember. Those moves last night only came to me in a flash of inspiration. Memory aside, what kind of job could I get there with my poor eyesight? It's better if I just keep on earning money here, peacefully. The words were like a basin of cold water thrown over Chungong's head, and they doused even his smile. Shen Xiao couldn't see it, but he could feel the youth's dejection. You're still young. You shouldn't fantasize about being an overnight success. We're not people of the Jianghu. Wouldn't we be out of our depth if we joined a Jianghu guild all of a sudden when we don't know any of the rules? Chun Gong was extremely unhappy. I don't know what out of our depth means. I just know that the money I earn from hauling rice every day isn't even enough for us to rent a room at an inn. I know that medicine and food both cost money. You might be all noble and whatever, but does money fall out of the sky? It's not like I'm a thief or a robber, so don't talk like I only stand around all day dreaming that money will land on my head. Hey, what's wrong? Don't scare me. All I did was complain about you a little. Shen Xiao clutched his head, waiting for the burst of pain to pass. Slowly he said, I won't join the Liu He Guild. I'm going to Xuandu Mountain. Xuandu Mountain? Cheng Gong asked curiously. What kind of place is that? He'd grown up in Funing County, lived there his whole life, and had never gone to school, so his knowledge was limited. He'd only heard about the Liu He Guild because they had a branch in the county. He'd heard little of anything else. To him, the world of the Jianghu was a far distant thing. Shun Xiao shook his head without answering, then lapsed back into a daze. Hey, say something, you, Chen Gong snarled. I used my own money to get you treatment and medicine. You'd better pay me back. For the next few days, I'll set up a fortune telling stall, as before. Soon I'll be able to pay you back. Chun Gong could see that Shen Qiao was completely uninterested in joining the Liu He Guild and couldn't help but feel demoralized. If Shen Qiao didn't go, then who would give him a second glance when all he had to offer was the strength to haul rice? What kind of place is Xuandu Mountain? He asked. A mountain. Chun Gong let the non answer hang. He thought Shen Qiao might irritate him to death. Bullshit, he said. Of course I know it's a mountain. I'm asking what you're gonna do there. I don't know either, said Shen Qiao, but someone told me that I came from there, so I want to go back and see it. Where is this mountain? Near the border of Qi, Zhou, and Chun. Chen Gong was shocked. That far away? Then how did you get from there to here? Helplessly, Shen Qiao said, Haven't I already said? I've forgotten many things and still can't remember. If I knew the answer, why would I talk about returning there to investigate? Chen Gong thought for a moment. How about this? I'll go with you, and you won't need to pay me back either. All you gotta do is teach me a move or two, like what you did, so I can beat 6 or 7 guys in the ground. Then, when we reach Chun, I'll join the Liu Hu Guild, and you'll head to your Xuandu Mountain. How about that? Funing County is your home, said Shun Xiao. It's a peaceful place, nearly untouched by warfare, and it's very different from the outside world. Once I leave, I'll need to go straight west, and the closer it is to Qizhou border, the more chaos there will be. I have no choice. But why would you undertake such a dangerous journey? My father and mother are dead, and my step siblings have taken over my house. I'd rather forge my own path out there than stay in the Funing County hauling rice. Didn't you say I'm suited to joining the army? To join one, I'll need to go where wars are frequent and soldiers are in demand, right? I don't want to huddle like this my whole life, with even beggars bullying me and looking down on me. Shen Qiao was silent for a moment. Very well then. He'd barely said anything when Chung Gong fell to his knees before his bed with a thump. Praise be to Shifu! Please accept this disciple's respects. Shen Qiao's mouth twitched. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Get up. I can accept disciples, and I won't. As for the moves I have now, I might not remember them completely. At most, I can only teach you what I recall, and I can't say how effective that will be. You don't need to take me as your master." When he heard this, Chun Gong sprang up. Brightly, he said, "All right, but you're older than me, so from now on, I'll call you Xiongjiang. If anyone ever picks on me again, you've got to help me out." Shen Xiao smiled but didn't reply. Instead, he drifted off once more. Chun Gong watched him in silence for a few moments. When he saw that Shen Xiao wasn't going to rouse himself, all he could do was turn around and leave. Shun Xiao had been gravely injured by his fall from the cliff, with all his bones shattered. He'd been in critical condition, but those injuries had nearly all mended during the 3 months he spent in the villa with Yu Shengyan. What had been fundamentally damaged were his internal organs, along with his martial arts. In that one turn of events, he'd almost lost his abilities entirely. Now, all that was left were his fuzzy memories and a half crippled body. Making a full recovery was easier said than done. If this had happened to someone else, it would be a severe, practically devastating blow. But in spite of that, Chung Gong was the angry one between the two of them. They didn't return to the temple, but instead negotiated with the innkeeper for a discount and rented the room for a month straight. All month, Shen Qiao told fortunes at Duke Jiang's temple, and Cheng Gong hauled rice at the granary. At night, when he returned from work, Cheng Gong learned martial arts from Shen Qiao. His foundations weren't bad, and he had some talent, so within a month, he'd made decent progress. However, without internal breathing to support his development, in the end, it was little better than a castle built on air. His skills would hold up well enough against hoodlums and thugs, but if he encountered a true practitioner, all his moves would be useless. After that month, Shen Qiao and Cheng Gong left Funing County and set off towards the west. Shen Qiao hadn't seen Yu Shengyan since leaving the villa, nor anyone else from Huanyue sect. Funing County was very close to the villa where he'd stayed, but every time he went to Duke Jiang's temple to set up his fortune telling stall, all he saw and heard about were thoroughly ordinary people, along with a thoroughly lively market life. The Jianghu seemed incomparably distant, so distant that Shen Qiao sometimes felt that he had no need to go to Xuandu Mountain after all, that living his entire life in Funing County might not be so bad. But now and then, a heaviness would settle in his chest. This, together with rainy day pain that prickled through his freshly mended bones, the faint glimpses of past events that flashed through his mind, and the true chi that flitted infrequently through his limbs and entire body, were all reminders of one thing. The Shun Qiao he was now was not a whole Shun Qiao. To the west of Funing County lay Huai Province. It was a large province. It was heavily defended due to its proximity to Zhou. The provincial governor there was usually appointed by the emperor himself, and from time to time the imperial censors would patrol, frequently putting the area under martial law. Although the world had been divided for a long time, the various countries put no prohibitions on trade between countries. That is, with the exception of Huai Province's provincial governor, Shen Buyi, who had a peculiar way of doing things. The moment he took office, he ordered the closure of the border trade between Qi and Zhou. Any merchants found engaging in trade would be severely punished. Shen Buyi told the emperor that spies from Zhou could easily slip into the trading markets, then leak the details of their border defenses to the enemy. He advised that Qi close the rest of its border trade as well. And though Qi's Emperor Gao Wei didn't adopt this particular suggestion of Shen Buyi's, he still had high praise for his loyalty and issued a decree of commendation. Shen Buyi was not only excessive when it came to governance, he was also heavy handed in his flattery of Qi's officials and nobles alike. The emperor's trusted subjects would often put in good words for him, and it was only on their good graces that he'd soared from a small town county lieutenant to a provincial governor. After considering how much they would spend if they entered the city, Shun Qiao and Cheng Gong decided to stay overnight at a temple outside it instead. The next day, they'd head directly into the city for supplies. That way, they could be out of the city and on their way by the afternoon. The temple was called Chu Yuan Temple. They'd heard it was in use by worshippers, but in truth, it didn't look much better than the dilapidated temple they'd lived in at Funing County. Inside Chu Yuan Temple were three monks, one old abbot, and two young monks he'd adopted. It was a simple place, with only two private rooms for sleeping in, one for the old abbot and one for the two young monks. Other than that, it was all communal cots. Chengong was used to living a hard life. Back in that dilapidated temple in Funing County, forget about a cot. He hadn't even had a blanket. To him, these were very cushy accommodations. Meanwhile, Shun Qiao was easy to please, the type to adapt to any circumstances. He certainly wasn't going to raise any objections either. When they entered the sleeping area, they realized that another group of four young men had arrived before them. They'd even brought two large storage chests into the room. Chen Gong was always wary of other people, so he could be hostile and didn't easily cozy up to strangers. Shen Chao's poor eyesight meant that even though he wanted to greet them, he couldn't properly see what they looked like. The four people who made up the other party made no move to approach them either, just subtly looked Cheng Gong and Shen Chao up and down. When they saw there was no chi strengthening their steps and that their clothes were shabby, the group paid them no further attention. Soon enough, the two young monks came in carrying their bedding. The sleeping quarters were already cramped. Two extra people made them even more crowded. Chun Gong was bubbling over with dissatisfaction. He couldn't help but murmur, "6 people's already plenty, and now there's 2 more?" The young monk heard and whispered to him, "Benefactor, there's a young lady traveling with those benefactors over there, and it's inconvenient for her to share a room with us. Therefore, our humble selves lent our room to her. Help others, and others will help you." Since it was a lady, she needed a room to herself. Chung Gong was still unhappy, but there wasn't much he could say. Seeing how the party of 4 were all carrying swords drained his urge to speak even more. But then he happened to see something out the corner of his eye and grew excited. While everyone was eating, he took the opportunity to grab Shun Qiao and whisper, "Did you see? Those people are from the Liu He Guild. The symbol of the Liu He Guild is on their clothes and chests. It's exactly the same as the one in Funing County." Shun Qiao smiled a little. "How could I see with my poor eyesight?" Chung Gong's excitement didn't dim in the slightest. "Say, if I find a chance to talk to them and they take a liking to me, do you think they'd agree to let me join the Liu He Guild?" Shen Qiao knew that Chung Gong's heart was still set on the Liu He Guild. Even after such a long journey, he'd never changed his mind. Slowly, Shen Qiao said, "I don't think that's a good idea." Chapter 9. Terror at Midnight. "Why not?" asked Chung Gong. "I saw how you tried to approach them just now," said Shen Qiao, "and how they paid you no heed. Furthermore, they didn't say a word when both of us were there, so it seems they are either very wary or unwilling to speak with us. Either way, I'm afraid your wish will be in vain." Chun Gong was upset, but he had to admit that Shen Qiao was right. "I knew that those types would look down on someone from the bottom rung like me. One day, I'm gonna be the one stepping on everyone's heads, and then they'll have to kowtow to me." Shun Qiao knew that his hang-ups came from his experiences growing up and could never be resolved with just a couple of words, so he held his tongue on more advice. The food at Chu Yuan Temple was as simple as the temple itself, a bowl of white congee and a few side dishes. The side dishes had been picked right there at the temple. The taste was decent enough. Shen Qiao ate slowly, but Chun Gong went fast. He'd failed to get in good with the Liu He Guild, so he was in a bad mood. Once he'd hastily shoveled down a few bites, he returned to the sleeping area. Not long after he left, two of the other party staying at the temple entered to eat. Though Shen Qiao could see light by now, he was still unable to discern objects clearly, and his eyes would start to hurt when he used them for too long. Most of the time, he simply kept them closed and didn't use them unless he had to. At that moment, he saw four vague figures approaching and then sitting down at another long table. Two of them were wearing dresses. They seemed to be women. Shen Qiao was well aware of the situation. He knew the Liu He Guild must be escorting something important on this trip, so all four men didn't eat together at once, but left behind two with their cargo to keep watch. And the two women must be the female guests who'd borrowed the young monk's rooms. Shen Qiao minded his own business. He fumbled through his porridge, and once he was done, he reached over to grab the bamboo cane at his side. The bamboo cane fell and hit the ground with a sharp crack. Shen Xiao frowned slightly. His hand hadn't even reached the cane, and it couldn't have fallen for no reason. I touched it accidentally, came a woman's soft voice. Please forgive me, sir. She bent down to pick up the bamboo cane and handed it to Shen Qiao. No matter. Shen Qiao took it and nodded in her direction, then prepared to stand up and leave. But the woman continued. Our meeting was fated. May I have this gentleman's name? My last name is Shen, said Shen Qiao. Is Shen Xianshang heading into the city? That is correct. There are many inns and relay stations there, so why did you choose this ramshackle little temple instead of finding a place to stay inside the city? She was obviously trying to pry into Shen Qiao's business. If he were someone else, he'd likely counter with, You're staying here too, aren't you? What gives you the right to stick your nose in? But Shen Xiao was a mild-tempered man, and he gave a proper answer. We don't have enough money, he said. Staying inside the city would be even more expensive, so we're waiting until tomorrow morning to enter. That way, we won't need to stay there overnight. His voice was pleasant, and he had an aura that drew people in. It was difficult to ignore, despite his rough clothes, and it was even more difficult to see him as the same kind of person as Chun Gong. That the two of them hung out together despite their complete incompatibility, and that they were even traveling companions, inevitably drew suspicion. People came up to them to try and probe for the full story, especially since they were ordinary people, wandering around with no martial arts ability whatsoever. His answer was reasonable, and she couldn't spot any flaws, so she warmly replied, I was too forward. Please forgive me. My last name is Yun. I'm called Yun Fuyi. Shen Qiao nodded. Enjoy your meal, Yun Yangzi. This humble Shen will take his leave now. Take care, sir. Shen Qiao slowly felt his way to the door using his bamboo cane. Yun Fuyi frowned a little as she watched his retreating back, but said nothing. Hu Yu, who was sitting to her side, said, Deputy Leader, I fear those two showing up here isn't a coincidence. That kid is no big deal, but this Shun guy, he may look like a blind man, but why would a blind man be wandering about? He might be here for our cargo. His twin brother, Hu Yan, rolled his eyes at him. If you've noticed, do you think the deputy leader hasn't? I was testing him just now, said Yun Fuyi. He has no internal energy and didn't recognize my name. It doesn't seem like he's pretending either. Regardless, we should be careful tonight. I'd thought that word would travel too freely within the crowded city, so it would be safer to stay outside. But now it seems such precautions were ineffective. Just what kind of treasure is our cargo? Asked Hu Yu. We've met two sets of robbers already along our journey, each stronger than the last, and there's still a long road south between here and Jiankang. What I'm afraid of is a mishap with the cargo. If that happens, losing the goods themselves may be a small matter, but staining the Liu He Guild's reputation is a large one. Though their company was small in number, they were decidedly the elite of the Liu He Guild. Considering that they were accompanied by Yuan Fuyi, the deputy leader herself, their strength as a group was undeniable. But even so, they dared not take things lightly. Yuan Fuyi shook her head. The guild leader gave us a strict order to escort this to Jiankang, no matter what. He sent a message earlier saying he would rush to Luo province and meet us there. Then we'll continue south together. When they heard that their leader wasn't far ahead, Hu Yan and Hu Yu's spirits rose, and they started up again, guessing exactly what was in those two chests that could warrant such earnest attention from the guild. The Liu He guilds stretched far, both north and south of the Yangtze River. They transported cargo here and there countless times over the years, and had even escorted treasures from the imperial palace. But they'd never seen the higher ups take anything this seriously before. The deputy leader personally escorting something, and the guild leader personally coming to pick it up? That was an unprecedented, earth shattering first. Hu Yan and Hu Yu hailed from Longmen sect, and they belonged to a small number of top martial artists within the Jianghu. But they were still young after all. Facing two sets of robbers targeting their goods one after the other hadn't dampened their fighting spirit in the least. In fact, it made them all the more eager to keep pushing onward. Unlike them, Yuan Fuyi was privately worried. In any case, she said, we should keep on our guard until we meet up with the guild leader. Night. Compared to the city, the outskirts were quieter. So quiet, in fact, it made one's flesh crawl a little. There was little entertainment to be had in the small temple at night, so everyone went to bed early. Other than Hu Yan and Hu Yu, Shen Qiao and Chen Gong also shared their communal cots with two of the Liu He Guild's hall masters, and their martial abilities exceeded even the Hu brothers. Such a formidable battle formation appearing in the Jianghu was very noteworthy. Chen Gong understood little about the Jianghu, but even he could tell that these people were all very powerful. He tried every means and made every effort to try to get close to them and join the Liu He Guild. But his hot fervor ran up against a frigid wall. They simply ignored him. They even extended more civility to Shen Qiao than they did Chen Gong. After several attempts, Chen Gong finally grew discouraged. At times, he was frustrated and indignant. At other times, he felt that he hadn't shown enough sincerity, that tomorrow he should go and tell them that he only wanted to enter the Liu He Guild to clean or do odd jobs, and then maybe they'd accept him at last. Of course, his racing thoughts kept him from sleeping. After tossing and turning a few times, all of a sudden, Chen Gong noticed several members of the Liu He Guild moving about. Their movements were quick and light. They threw on their clothes and shoes, then vanished in the span of a blink. Curious, Chen Gong wanted to get up too and take a look, but then a hand reached over from behind him and held him down. Chen Gong jolted in surprise before he realized it was Shen Qiao. Don't go out, stay here, said Shen Qiao quietly. I'll just crack open the door and take a look, said Chen Gong. I'm not gonna do anything. Just as he spoke, yelling and the sound of fighting came from outside. Chen Gong was immediately seized by excitement and apprehension. He felt like he'd come another step closer to the Jianghu of his fantasies. But just as he reached to open the door, he felt his fingers go numb, and the entire set of doors blew wide open with a powerful gust that swirled in from outside, its winds mighty like a hurricane. Unable to dodge in time, Chen Gong cried out in pain as he stumbled backwards. His back slammed into the edge of the bed, instantly turning his cry into a scream. And that wasn't the end of it, because in the next moment, someone clamped their hand around his throat. The person choking him pressed gently upward with his arm, and Chungong involuntarily flew with emotion. The scene before him changed from within the room to outside of it. Chungong's eyes were wide with fear, but he was completely unable to call out. Just when he'd managed to find his footing, he heard someone laugh and say, San Lang, are you stupid? One glance will tell you this kid doesn't know martial arts. There's no way he's a member of the Liu He Guild. What did you capture him for? What? He's not with the Liu He Guild? Damn it! No wonder he was such easy pickings. I've just captured some trash. The man holding him broke into loud curses, and his grip tightened. The pain was immense. Chungong's eyes watered. I'm done for. I'm going to be killed. With that realization, Chungong was filled with 10,000 regrets that he hadn't listened to Shen Qiao, that he hadn't just hidden quietly inside the room, but he had tried to come out and watch the commotion instead. The Jianghu was still far out of his reach, but matters of life and death were close at hand. Chungong felt a sharp burst of pain in his neck, a sign that his throat was about to be crushed. But a moment later, the man who'd been about to kill him gave a yelp of surprise, snatched back his hand, and moved away. Freed from the pressure, Chungong's entire body went limp, and he fell to his knees, coughing incessantly. When Mu Rongxun had been about to kill Chungong, he'd been aware that someone else was in the room, but he hadn't taken the two of them seriously at all. They were small fry. He definitely didn't expect that the other man would have the gall to launch a sneak attack just as he was about to do away with the kid. The bamboo cane came at him light as a feather, without even a wisp of internal energy behind it, so Mu Rongxun thought he could grab it easily. But when his hand touched its edge, it slipped bizarrely to the side and thrust toward the key acupoint on his back. Mu Rongxun had been forced to release Chen Gong and dodge to his side. Who are you? He narrowed his eyes at the other man. We are not members of the Liu He Guild, nor are we people of the Jianghu. We just happen to be staying here for the night and have nothing to do with your feud. So please, show us some mercy and let us go, said Shen Qiao. There wasn't enough light for him to see Mu Rongxun. He could only judge his general location and clasped his hands beseechingly in that direction. But Mu Rongxun saw through it at once. You're blind? Within the span of a night, the tiny Chu Yuan temple became the center of a maelstrom. Although Yuan Fuyi had long anticipated a fight, tonight's situation far outstripped her expectations. As her sleeves rolled up, she sent out a palm strike while floating backwards. Her pose was beautiful and elegant, brimming with immortal grace. To a bystander, she seemed to be drifting in dance. It was unfathomable just how much power was contained within her palm. One of her opponent's sleeves furled, then flicked, easily dispelling Yuan Fuyi's attack. But Yuan Fuyi spotted two daggers, thin as willow leaves, sliding out from those sleeves. Their blades flashed, then quickly vanished. But the crushing wind behind her palm dropped away completely. This was a dire opponent, Yuan Fuyi realized. Yuan Fuyi. From the clouds drift spring rain, on clothes they fall, yet leave no stain, as expected of Liu He Guild's second in command. Outsiders all say that Yuan Fuyi is a woman, so she must be merely a figurehead. Clearly, such naysayers haven't had the opportunity to appreciate Deputy Leader Yuan's capabilities. A silent blast of air accompanied these words, gusting towards Yuan Fuyi. Her expression shifted slightly. No longer did it show the placid calm with which she'd fought before. She thrust out with a flurry of palm strikes, their shape blooming in the air like a lotus flower, and her true qi rammed forward, firing forward in an even wall. Only when the two blasts collided did Yuan Fuyi realize how unpredictable her opponent's true qi was. Sharp as a needle, there was no opening it couldn't slip through. It pierced precisely into even the slightest crack, and when her palm brushed it, a billowing coldness penetrated her flesh and blood, stabbing straight through to her marrow. She had no time to withdraw. Her opponent gave her no time to react. Before the first burst subsided, a second one began, and like the rising spring tide of a river, it flowed into her, wave upon wave. She'd lost this invisible round, so Yuan Fuyi thought better of taking the attack head on and retreated, even though it meant giving up ground. By the time she landed, a dull pain was already throbbing through her chest, a salty sweet taste of blood in the back of her throat. She didn't spit it out, but swallowed it down, acting as if nothing had happened. Who is this distinguished master? She asked. Her opponent saw Yuan Fuyi's lack of reaction and made an incredulous noise. Mild surprise and respect came over his face. In all of Qi, there are very few who can withstand my palm strike. You are truly quite capable. Who is this distinguished master? Yuan Fuyi asked again. The man arrogantly clasped his hands behind his back and sneered. You're in Qi now, and you wish to transport Qi's items across the border. Is the court not allowed to take an interest? Concerning today's incident, if the Liu He Guild is willing to leave the items behind, we won't trouble you any more and will guarantee your safe passage out of Qi. At his mention of Qi's imperial court, Yuan Fuyi's heart pounded. She quickly put two and two together. You're a member of the Qi dynasty? You're Mu Rongqing. Murong clan had been displaced by the collapse of the Yan dynasty, and all through the next several dynasties they'd wandered here and there. The current patriarch of the Murong family, Murong Qin, always boasted of being a descendant of the Murong royal family, yet he'd become a lackey in the country of Qi, serving its emperor Gao Wei. It was only due to his reputation as Qi's #1 martial artist that people tried to please him with flattery and blatant displays of admiration. Under normal circumstances, Yuan Fuyi would have no qualms about fighting him, but he was obviously after the cargo she was escorting, and utterly dead set on having them. That meant, where are Liu Qingya and Shangguang Xingchen? Her expression twisted a touch as she asked after the two hall masters who'd been traveling with her. Hu Yu and Hu Yan were taken aback. Hall masters Liu and Shangguan were both back in the room guarding the cargo. Could they be... Harshly, Yuan Fuyi said, I didn't think the Murong patriarch, Qi's #1 martial artist, would need to bring his men along for an ambush. Wouldn't it be laughable if word got out? Murong Qing smiled mockingly. Deputy Leader Yuan herself has stepped in personally. How could I dare be so arrogant as to come alone? In any case, we're not the only ones here tonight. Will you still not show yourselves, you rats in the shadows? All right, everyone, that concludes the reading of chapters 7, 8, and 9 of Thousand Autumns, or Qianqiu, Volume 1. I don't know about you guys, but I am thoroughly enjoying this story so far. Again, like I said, I have already read this series before, but I am just really enjoying reading it again. So, anyway, I will see you all next time. Have a good day or night, depending on where you are in the world.